two people get together or, like whatever, and they just all of a sudden like have those unwritten rules that they're maybe unconsciously or subconsciously expecting their partner to just like mind read or know. Yeah.
All of these unwritten rules that were unconsciously there. And when you get them out on the table, now you can talk about them. Now you can discuss them. Now you can adapt them and amend them and evolve them to fit the relationship that you want.
Conscious couples, business partners, and singles committed to attracting their dream partner. Welcome to the Conscious Couples podcast, where we share our life, love story, and combined relationship expertise to help you create and consistently cultivate the most magnificent, intimate relationship possible.
Never again will you feel hopeless and alone in your intimate relationship challenges.
Having accumulated thousands of hours coaching conscious couples and individuals all over the world, as well as starting and growing a global business together, Alan and I are here to guide you in all things relationships.
Thank you again for tuning into the one place where it's not about you or me, it's about the we. Conscious couples and singles from all over the world, welcome back to the Conscious Couples podcast. I squeaked there for a second. I'm sorry about that. Welcome to episode number 22, how to create your own relationship standards. So this actually, as you know, on the Conscious Couples podcast, we're on the love train and we're taking you on a journey, and it's designed to really help you build incrementally towards the relationship of your dreams, whether you start off single or whether you're already in a relationship. That is the purpose behind this podcast. And we didn't anticipate this, but we were recently on the phone, a relationship talks call with one of our listeners, and Emilia had an awesome idea. So this was Emilia's idea. I'm going to let her go. As always, ladies first.
Well, before we even get started on that, we want to give a big shout out to Next Level Podcast Solutions for producing this show and all of that which you see here and observe on social medias. So with that being said, this topic, we have been, on so many different relationship talks with clients from around the world. And one thing that we always find is that when people are struggling in relationships, a lot of the times we ask the question of like, okay, what is the core problem underneath this? Or what is the core issue? And we try to get down to the root. And what we find oftentimes is that couples or conscious singles are kind of struggling to figure out, okay, well, I know it doesn't feel right, or I know we might be off here, or we might not be on the same page, or there's a miscommunication. And it's hard to articulate necessarily how or why something might be off in their relationship, or if they're in the dating world, they don't necessarily know exactly and have a clear picture on what they want. And this initially originated, this specific episode originated like you said, babe, after a conversation that we had where, this listener had a lot of clarity around her dreams, her career goal, and what that looked like for her and what was aligned for her, what wasn't. But when it came to the relationship area, there was a lot of, ambiguity or a lack of clarity on what really her dream partner would look like. And I'm not just talking about looks, right? Talking about how would they behave when they're in the car together, right? What kind of music would they turn on? And trying to really build that vision out of her dream partner is really challenging. And we see that a lot with couples who, maybe they're not yet at the place of their dreams in their relationship. And the relationship standards is essentially, if you were to think about it, it's, we're well aware that people create vows when they get married. And these are the standards, if you will, that they abide by, or the guardrails for their relationships. But we oftentimes forget about what are the every single day standards that are the actual practical application of behaviors, of who and what we value in a relationship. So that being said, babe, I'll pass it over back to you. But prior to that, the intention for this episode is really to help our listeners honor what they value. That's what standards are all about. Not putting someone in a box, but rather enabling you to, as the listener, value truly what you love and care about and what makes you so unique, especially as you build towards your own version of an extraordinary relationship.
So on this relationship talks call, again, this person had just gotten a lot of success in their career. They got a new job. They went from, 60 grand a year to 85, something like that. And she's like, I want to replicate that in the intimate arena when it comes to relationships. That's why she booked the call. Mm-hmm. And we essentially said, okay, so you're doing all these affirmations for your career. We got to apply those same principles to your relationship. And prior to Emilia and I meeting, we both had decided in advance what we wanted in an intimate partner and what our musts, must-nots, and negotiables were. Mm-hmm. So you and Bianca have a podcast called Evolve Ventures. Mm-hmm. And I think it's the 5th episode. It's the 6th. Okay, it's the 6th. I've sent that episode to so many people.
Same.
Because it's so critical. And what that episode is essentially the same as this, which is how to create your own relationship standards. And it's a very simple formula mm-hmm. of musts, must-nots, and negotiables. Mm-hmm. Every single time you enter into a relationship, it has unwritten rules. It has principles. And if you've ever seen Pirates of the Caribbean and they talk about the Pirates Code, they say, well, these are more like guidelines than actual rules. And in an intimate relationship, I think a lot about, and I told this to Emilia when we first got together, I said, mm-hmm. I want us to create our own rule book. I don't want to go into the dogma of the old, of like the man does this and the woman does that and all that crap.
Yeah.
I want to create our own rule book. And that's what we're doing on this podcast. Mm-hmm. But so that's really the long and short of it is this. You have 3 columns, and we have a digital asset as well that you can download in this episode. It's in the show notes. Mm-hmm. But there's 3 columns. The first column is musts. The second column is must not. And then the third column is negotiables. The musts are, this is something that your partner must be. This is your standard. There is no wiggle room here. Mm-hmm. Must not is something that just absolutely you cannot tolerate. You've done that before, or you've been with someone who's done that before and you just cannot tolerate. And then negotiables are kind of things where it's like, okay, this is a preference, but it's not a deal breaker for me. And so Emilia has some great examples of each of those. The most important lesson, though, I want to read it real quick, that I wrote down is setting standards creates clarity.
Yeah.
And just like this person who has so much clarity around what they wanted for their career, they started to actually affirm it in advance and say, I'm so grateful for my amazing job in the recruiting space. I'm so grateful for the team that I'm working for. Yeah. I'm so grateful that it's such an aligned company. All of these things, you have to do that same sort of thing in the relationship space. So if you're out there and you're single, you can do this for your future dream partner. Mm-hmm. And if you're out there and you're in a relationship, you're a conscious couple, you can sit down with your partner and say, hey, let's check in on these. Yeah. What are your musts, must-nots, and negotiables? And have we strayed a little bit from these since we first got together?
Or have we evolved? And babe, one of the things that you said in that I really, really appreciated was in the setting of the standards creates the clarity. Because I think, to your point, a lot of people just walk around and think like, this is the way of a relationship. Yep. And this is the relationship that's going to serve me. And 2 people get together or, like whatever. And they just all of a sudden like have those unwritten rules that they're maybe unconsciously or subconsciously expecting their partner to just like mind read or know. And until you have a dialogue, until you have clarity around it, that doesn't really get talked about, or unless you have an excuse to, like this podcast, to really get the conversation going. It's kind of just like, I'm going to abide by these set of rules and you're going to abide by these set of guidelines and we're going to make this relationship work. And the thing is, relationships, to make them extraordinary, it requires a lot of intentionality. And I know that because I know what's behind an extraordinary relationship. I've been in plenty of failed relationships, but now I have something that is truly extraordinary. And it's because of the work that you and I do every single day. And we've helped other relationships be extraordinary. So in the setting of your relationship standards, whether it be by yourself and you want to bring that to your partner, or it's by yourself and you want to bring that into the dating scene, the setting it up, like really getting clear on that in action. Like it's such a beautiful exercise because of the fact that you actually get to ask yourself, what is my standard? what do I value and what do I want? And I find that so many people struggle to actually admit to themselves what they want and actually admit to themselves what makes them so fulfilled and what could make this dream relationship for them. So
this is also going to help you too. I didn't mean to interrupt you, love, but a lot of times when you get in a relationship, there's the like you said, the unconscious, unwritten rules that you haven't talked about. And then a lot of times what happens is, a few months in, year in, you start living together, for example, all of a sudden you're like, oh, wait, I didn't sign up for that.
Or you broke a rule that someone else had.
Right, you broke a rule and you didn't know they had it.
Yeah, there's animosity or whatnot.
Or resentment.
Yep.
Right? And then they don't express it. Resentment happens or builds up. And you end up, a year, 2 years, 3 years down the road, and it's like, this isn't what I wanted. And it's like, well, you weren't intentional about communicating all of these unwritten rules that were unconsciously there. And when you get them out on the table, now you can talk about them. Now you can discuss them. Now you can adapt them and amend them and evolve them to fit the relationship that you want. Think of it like this. When you're building a home, you need a foundation, and then you need the infrastructure, and then you can put the roof on next. A lot of people, I think, assume the foundation and the infrastructure is done for you. And it's because of what you saw in a sitcom or what you saw growing up. And this is really where most people's standards come from, is what they saw modeled growing up.
Yes.
And
thank you for saying that.
Of course. And I saw a pretty terrible toxic relationship growing up, my mom and my stepdad. And I didn't have this modeled for me. And so I had to create my own. And I think it's really important for everyone to really sit down and do this work.
Thank you for saying that. Oftentimes we will mirror the standards that we grew up in. And it's very rare for people to go out and create their own. And so for those willing and courageous enough to take this journey, I applaud you, because it is scary sometimes to try to get clear on a different definition than you grew up with. And so I do want to make sure that I put it out there, because babe, you've done an extraordinary job at that.
Thank you.
Considering what you have grown up with, right? So all right. So with the must nots, negotiables, this is a great exercise, and you can start with one. And I encourage each one of you listening to just start with one, because sometimes that exercise of getting clear and setting what standards are for you can be sometimes overwhelming and daunting. And I know a lot of clients, when they start to think about it, it's like this: if you had a magic ball, and this magic ball, it's kind of like a genie. Like if a genie could pop out of it and you had 3 wishes, one would be a must that your partner has or is embodies. The second is a must not that your partner doesn't have, doesn't embody, is not behaving as or whatnot. And then your third was negotiable. And this genie could grant you these 3 wishes. What would those be? So to what you had said, babe, the must enable you to be who you aspire to be. So we had a listener, like we mentioned, and this example I want to share because I thought it was really near and dear to also what I can relate to, which in the past. So this listener shared a story about how she spoke with someone that she was dating about what she really enjoys and appreciates. She's a nature lover. I really love that. And she had shared with her partner at the time that she would prefer a plant that they could name and that she could nurture and that she could care for over a bouquet of flowers, because what was underneath that was really what she valued, which was nature, which was the loving and the caring of plants. And she didn't want to see a bouquet of flowers be brought in, even though, the intention was likely pure. It would die in front of her and there wouldn't be something that she could build towards. And so the partner at the time, they literally, I want to say it was like a week after that partner brought her a bouquet of flowers. And in that moment, what she shared with us, and I really appreciate the vulnerability here, was, it was heartbreaking and devastating. And how can you not kind of think go through all the other things that you've shared with a partner at the time and say, what else are they not hearing? What else are they not seeing? So an example of this standard that she would have a must is to be heard and seen, right, in her values. So in that example, a must for her would be a partner that really does care and hear her out. And hearing in action, a demonstration of that would be hearing what she's saying, bringing her a plant rather than a bouquet of flowers, right?
And I can relate, and I know why you can relate as well, because you had told me, because I got you flowers a couple times, and you had said that you'd prefer a plant because you don't like to see the flowers die.
Yeah.
And ever since then, I've gotten a couple plants, never any flowers. So
yeah.
Hi, my name is Lynn. I got to had the privilege of recently meeting with Alan and Emilia on one of their free sessions talking about relationships. So I am 42, I'm single, and I'm trying to figure out what it is that I'm doing wrong. So working with them will help me figure out what are my standards? What do I want in my future partner? What can I do to attract that partner? How can I, find someone where I could develop a long-lasting relationship with? Just from our brief conversation, I know that they have formulas. I mean, there's formulas, there's processes, there's strategic ways to go about, attracting the right people in your life, maintaining those relationships, how to communicate and grow together. So I am grateful that I connected with them, and I look forward to where this takes me in my future. All right, thanks. Bye.
I'm really grateful, and I feel very heard and seen. And, I know a lot of people have their own version of that. And so that's a must, right? So an example of a must not. So I had a client who, when we did this exercise, very powerful, I asked her to envision, okay, what's something that you definitely don't want in a partner? The must nots are for anything that this partner might have or embodies. This quality or characteristic or behavioral tendency, if they embody it and you're in a relationship with them, it would actually pull you outside of alignment and not enable you to honor what you value. So what this client had said, I really I'm just really not interested. And what's a deal breaker for me is if I'm starting to date someone and I realize that they have kids on their own. And as we started to dig, asking her, well, why is that? It's what's underneath that is that she wants to create a family of her own. And she didn't feel that she would be able to love those children as if they were her own, and she didn't feel as though that was super fair to those kids. Now, that's a must not. That's a deal breaker. If she were to date someone and really fall in love and then find out that they had kids of their own that they were kind of bringing into this relationship, that for her, because it's on her must not list, she would no longer continue that relationship. Okay. So that's a great example for that. The negotiable example was when I was talking to a friend who at the time she did not have these relationship standards and she hadn't had clarity around them. So she was in that exercise. I was kind of talking to her about, okay, what would be something that, to what Alan said, is a preference, but it's not necessarily a deal breaker. It's not an ultimatum that you would have. Just envision, again, like I said, if this genie could grant you a wish, what's something that's, negotiable? What can you work with? And she says, well, alcohol, drinking, I'm like, okay, tell me a little bit more about that. It's because she wouldn't mind necessarily going to the bar and cause she really enjoys having a drink and going out, and that would be a negotiable to her, and I'm like, okay, cool. We can work with that. That definitely widens the pool of fishes in the sea, definitely bigger. And so, for her, that was helpful for her to have clarity on, because if it was, and there's always standards, if it gets to a certain point, and she's like, well, if they're a drunk and if they get abusive when under the influence of alcohol, then that would shift this person into a must not. That would go into my must not bucket. But the negotiable, if they having a beer or drink, if we go out, whatever, I can work with that. Okay, cool. That's important for you to have clarity on. And I love this friend to death, but that's important for you to have clarity on, because if a negotiable ends up having no boundaries, no standards to it, then that can get her into risky water, where she might have thought, because she defined this as a negotiable, that, if, let's say, for example, she, starts getting abused while this partner is under the influence of alcohol, then that could be risky business, right? So having your must nots, and your negotiables are absolutely one of the most fundamental pillars that I believe in for relationships, because this becomes the groundwork for you to be able to, like I said, build your version of an extraordinary relationship. And these might shift and they might evolve. Excuse me. But what I found is that's very unlikely if you have complete clarity, if you're honest with yourself, and if like you have the courage to really come forward of like, this is what I'm willing to tolerate. This is absolutely what I'm not willing to tolerate. And this is kind of that lukewarm middle where someone could convince me this or that, depending on their behaviors, all that stuff. So
if this was uncomfortable for anyone, it's interesting because a lot of people are like thinking to themselves like, okay, well, I'm trying to put myself in their shoes. Mm-hmm. Well, what if you do love them and they have kids? And it's like, okay, well, here's the thing. Having clarity out of the gate does not mean these can't change.
Truth.
It doesn't mean that the right person can't come along and say, you know what, honestly, okay, so they drink a little more than I thought, or in my case, that would be a big no-no.
Yeah.
But I have, that's one of my must-nots is not drinking a lot, because I quit drinking 3 years ago.
Right.
But these can evolve.
Yeah.
They aren't set in stone. But here's the thing. And I think a lot of people don't set goals for this reason. A lot of people don't get clear on their core values for this reason. A lot of people don't get clear on their relationship standards for this reason because of a couple things. Mm-hmm. Number one, they're afraid that if I set these standards, then I'm going to close the door of opportunity too much and I'm not going to find anyone.
So true.
Okay. Or number two, they're already in a relationship and they love this person, and that if they create these musts, must-nots, and negotiables, they're going to cage their partner into this little box that they can't grow out of.
Right.
This is a fluid, flowing, evolving thing that you can set. And I think at the end of the day, we all have a choice in life about where we live, what kind of home we live in, what kind of partner we are with, what kind of family we start, what we do for our career. And all of these things require standards. And I'll just be vulnerable and honest here. I don't think that I had very clear standards. And I certainly didn't have standards modeled for me growing up. And so I ended up with very low standards at times for my partners, but also for myself. And I think at the end of the day, you just have to be very, very honest with yourself. And you have to be honest with your partner about these things as well. Otherwise, it will cause problems later on. And then you'll feel hurt or betrayed or, oh my God, I can't believe you said that or did that. That was one of my must-nots. It's like, well, I didn't know that. We never talked about it. Right? Yeah. So this is a really important framework. We do have a digital asset in the show notes. Again, there's a lot of room. Yeah. I think we have 5 spaces for each. Start with 1. Go from there. Once you get the juices flowing, maybe you'll get all 5. But at the end of the day, this is really the infrastructure that's going to help you build the dream relationship that you want.
One last comment that I'll make, and then we'll close up this episode, is, a heartstring of mine just got struck while you were saying that I want to make sure that I at least share, because, I think that not everyone might feel as though they have a choice to create their own standards. And I know that was definitely me way back when. And when I didn't feel like I had a choice, now I realize how privileged I am to have a choice, to choose who I get to marry if I want to, right? I get to choose what my standards are. I get to choose, like, I have a lot of privilege in choosing. We know this podcast is heard around the world, so we know you might not feel as though that's the case. And we also know there might be some of you that might not feel, because of your culture, because of your society, because of what was modeled around you, you don't have a choice. And I just want to...
Are you referring to arranged marriages? And stuff like that?
Marriages. Even like, for example, like Bianca, my business partner, she didn't necessarily feel as though she had a choice sometimes.
Right.
And because... I just think we oftentimes, our brain gets so accustomed to what our culture is, what our society dictates, and what our school system, our neighborhoods, all this stuff. And sometimes we don't feel as though we have a choice. We don't have that privilege. And so what I want to encourage.
You felt like you didn't have a choice growing up?
Sometimes. Yeah. Okay. I think sometimes because of,
parents
very
and stuff like that.
Rigidity. Yeah.
Right.
Especially let's talk, if we were to talk about cultures,
yeah.
I didn't necessarily feel that I had a choice
Great point.
to, if I wanted to, get in a relationship with a different culture than mine.
It's super important.
And so with this being said, I think that that's important to acknowledge where you might not feel as though you have a choice, because I know that for me was really helpful for me to acknowledge before I could even start to dream up of a partner, because your brain might shut down opportunities. Even just talking about let's say, for example, a culture that will shut down another culture that you don't want to get in. So the door might be closed. For example, I had a friend who's African American, and she grew up with a family that was very you marry into our culture. You don't marry into another. So she couldn't even fathom going on a date with, a white boy. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was such an interesting dialogue to go around, because in understanding this, it's okay, that door is closed because of your upbringing, not because you chose that.
Right.
And once she realized, and she, a grown ass woman, she's like, that's a belief that my culture forced upon me, not what I need to do now. So just for our listeners,
again, creating your own rule book.
Again, so important. And so that is absolutely essential to understand that you can create your own rule book. And I think we are so pro choosing your own standards.
Always.
Choosing your own way of life and getting out of that dogmatic belief that you can't. And so I just want to make sure that I say that sometimes it's hard to envision and dream and set standards if you don't acknowledge what you grew up in and what beliefs kind of put you in this box initially.
100% love.
I just want to say that. All right. With that being said, hopefully this episode was valuable to you. I know that this can be a loaded topic, but it is so empowering when you can actually get some clarity around this and then really have the law of attraction working for you. I've seen so many people start to leverage this digital asset, this concept, this exercise in their lives. And then all of a sudden it's oh my goodness, I'm seeing all these people who I might have never seen before as opportunities or as prospective partners. And it's crazy what happens there. So
real quick, have you ever bought a car and then noticed that car everywhere? It's because that car is now significant to you. And when you get clear on your relationship standards, you're going to pick up on the people who are hitting those standards. And so it's going to to your point, it's going to open your eyes. You do not want the potential dream relationship of your life to pass you by because you did not prime your mind in advance and you weren't intentional enough.
Yeah. Don't
just stumble upon. You're not going to stumble upon a dream relationship. And even if you did, despite what Hollywood might make it sound like, it's don't count on that. Don't count on that. Yeah. Be more intentional.
Hell yeah. Heck yeah. All right. So we want to invite you to our next Relationship Talks event. We host these every single month, but the key here is there's literally, I don't think we've ever repeated the topic that we review, which is awesome because it's new content every single time. And it's really hot and relevant to a lot of what we're experiencing globally. And we hear that from our listeners all the time. So this August 11th at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, it's completely free. Zoom. You don't even have to have your camera on or your mic on. You don't even need to engage if you don't want to, but you'll find yourself around other people who are conscious and they're either in a relationship or they're conscious singles. And we'll be digging into building your future as a team, which I think is, relationship standards can certainly fall into that bucket of what you can do to build your future as a team. So if you are interested in something like that, the link will be in the show notes and we would love to see our listeners in that room.
Yeah, please join us. Also, every Saturday we do Service Saturday and we do one free Relationship Talks coaching session with a listener. We love to meet our listeners. We just did one this past weekend rather. It's Sunday when we're recording this. So happy 4th of July tomorrow if you are from this country, and happy Canada Day, I think is what it's called if you're from Canada, in this long weekend. But what I wanted to say was this: one courageous moment can change your entire life. The person that we spoke to, actually, it ended up being yesterday morning. Who knows? Maybe that conversation sparked something inside of her that could have helped her attract her dream partner. And if you do meet the love of your life, or should I say when you do meet the love of your life, it will change your entire life. And so one conversation can change your entire trajectory forever. Join us. We don't bite. We're excited to meet you. We love to meet our listeners. And the link will be in the show notes to book on our calendar.
We can't wait to see you there.
As always, it's not about me or you. It's about the we. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye, everyone. Bye. Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Conscious Couples podcast. We love connecting with the Conscious Couples community, so please make sure you follow us on Instagram. I am at Evolve with Emilia, and Alan is Lazaros88.
Also, if you or your partner resonated with this episode, leave us a review at the link in the show notes, and please share this with someone you love and care about.
Until next time, remember, it's not about you or me. It's about
the we.